Awesome. Okay, so can you first tell me your first and last name, spell it, and then your title?
Lisa Cottrell, Lisa Cottrell, PhD. So, or Dr. Lisa Cottrell. I also have two board certifications. So typically it would be Lisa Cottrell, PhD, CBSM, DBSM, and that refers to my sleep medicine specialty.
Nice. Okay, that's very helpful. And then your title at Aurora.
It's just Dr. Lisa Cottrell.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So what happens to our brains when we're sleeping? I know that, there's a lot of recovery as far as our muscles go. Of course, your brain is very active while you're sleeping, going through those different stages, but what is our brain doing when we're sleeping?
So sleep is an active process in the brain during which electrical activity varies in ways that are different from wakefulness. We still don't know why we sleep. We believe that during sleep, the brain stores new information, stabilizes memory, and that waste products may be removed from brain cells during sleep.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know about that. I knew about like the consolidating and getting rid of a few things. But the brain cell part was very interesting. Okay, so what is the difference between the 5 stages? From what I understand, we have the first layer, which is like you're aware of things, but your eyes are closed. And then you're in like a little bit of a deeper sleep, and then you're in that 3, 4 stage deep sleep, then REM sleep. So can you just kind of break those down for us?
Sure. So I'm just going to really make the distinction between non-REM and REM sleep. So really, we mostly think about sleep now as, first of all, with respect to brain wave activity, there is wakefulness, but then there is stage 1 sleep, stage 2 sleep, stage 3 sleep, and REM sleep. That's usually how we categorize it nowadays. And so there are these non-REM sleep stages, which go from, lighter, if you will, to deep sleep. So that deep sleep is what we would also call stage 3 sleep. And that's where you have a slow brainwave pattern. And this is where we think this is, again, memory storage, muscle and bone building, tissue repair, strengthening the immune system. That may all be going on in this, what we call deep sleep, but that's a non-REM sleep stage. During the night the balance is mostly non-REM sleep and mostly actually stage 2 non-REM sleep, which I guess you could just think of as kind of medium sleep. REM sleep is different from non-REM sleep in that it refers to rapid eye movement. So eyes move back and forth under the eyelids, muscle tone is decreased. We have vivid dreams in REM sleep. And we think that during REM sleep, our problem-solving skills are also strengthened and creativity may be facilitated in REM sleep.
Okay, kind of a dual part follow-up question. One, why do our eyes move in REM sleep, or I guess like sleep at all? Like why does that even happen? And then two, when do the dreams happen, and how does that dictate? Does that have an effect on our sleep? Like I sometimes will have nightmares, okay, to be totally real with you. And I usually didn't sleep very well. You know what I mean? So I was wondering if there was like a correlation in that.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that as succinctly as I can. So there are just changes in muscle electrical activity that affects muscle management and your eyes. So that's the answer to that. With respect to, okay, ask me the second half of that question again. What?
Do dreams have an effect on our sleep? And I just kind of made the analogy that like, when I have like a nightmare or something, I didn't sleep too well.
Right. So, I mean, yes and no, right? So it's a complicated interaction between those REM dreams and waking that results in the disruption of sleep under the circumstances you're describing. So, for example, if a person is having nightmares, they may also be having poor sleep more generally because of other factors that are possibly also associated with, them having the nightmares. And so that's going to make that person more likely to wake up during the night. And that will be, combined with the likelihood of waking up during a particularly distressing dream. However, in the normal course of events, REM sleep is part of how our brain goes through sleep over the night. And so having those REM dreams is not going to, in and of itself, wake us up more.
Okay, that makes sense. REM sleep seems like the good stuff. That's like, the pot,
I
right? Like, is that what we're always trying to strive for?
No, that's a misconception. So what your brain wants is the different kinds of sleep in the proportions that they're meant to be, which is actually mostly stage 2 sleep, and then some REM, then some stage 3, and then stage 1. So really what your brain wants is those proportions. And sleep does change over your lifespan. It's a developmental process. So for instance, what sleep looks like for a newborn is very, very different from what it looks like even for a young child. And for example, a young child has a much different sleep pattern than an adult and does get a lot of that slow wave or deep sleep or stage 3 sleep, whereas we need less and less of that as we get older. So, but really in adulthood, it's those proportions that the brain is trying to get. And it will basically, do that if sleep is well consolidated and, the environment is good for sleep.
So speaking of that, environment for sleep, what is, I feel like we all know the things to do before we go to sleep. We just don't do them, right? So not having your phone, not having a regular schedule, not having a bunch of noise or, light around you. Like I like to turn almost all the lights off or, just have very dim lighting when I'm getting ready for bed and I'm doing like that routine. So what is like the ideal bedtime routine?
Well, the ideal bedtime routine is the routine that works for you. However, most people do best when, as you said, they are off screens at least an hour before bedtime. And the reason for that is not only because of the blue light that comes off the screens that will be very activating to our circadian system. You don't want that right before bedtime. But also because a lot of the things that we do on those devices are quite activating, right? So people checking their work email before bedtime, things like this. I mean, it should be obvious, but many people engage in those activities as part of their routine and don't really realize that it's very activating and then is likely to keep you awake longer than you otherwise might be. So, off screens, and then have a good sort of buffer time in which you're just doing something that for you is reasonably low key and relaxing. Some people like to read, some people like to listen to music, some people, like to do lots of other things that, or, talk to their spouse or partner, things like this. So a routine that is just sort of a disconnection, a wind down, and also keeping a regular sleep schedule is very important.
Okay. Something I used to do a lot of when I was on the morning schedule, I was a morning news anchor, was I would really use a lot of red light because it kind of tricked my circadian rhythm to be like, it's bedtime, even though it's 4 p.m., you know? So how does red light benefit us, you know, even if we're on a normal schedule? And should we be using
Yeah,
it regularly?
yeah, I mean, red light is not necessarily, you know, beneficial. It's just less activating than blue or green light. And so if you need to have light coming at you, it's probably going to be less activating than the blue or green light.
Okay. And then as far as um going to sleep, staying asleep, what are the best way, like what advice would you give to people that have a hard time falling asleep? Maybe they have insomnia or chronic insomnia, or they're waking up in the middle of the night constantly, whether that could be from sleep apnea or again from insomnia, or what would you recommend to them?
Well, okay, so we start with basic sleep hygiene, which you want to be implementing preventively, right? So cooler cooler room temperatures promote, falling asleep and staying asleep better. Cooler temperatures are associated with the release of melatonin, which is a sleep regulating hormone. And the body temperature normally lowers during sleep, so a cooler room temperature will help thermal regulation, which will help to have better sleep maintenance. So the general rule about keeping a regular sleep schedule, those are things that are going to improve your ability to maintain healthy sleep. Once someone has insomnia, so insomnia is trouble falling asleep or staying asleep at least a few nights a week over the course of a few months. By the time someone has that, that is diagnosed as insomnia. And that actually warrants targeted intervention, because we know that sleep hygiene alone won't treat insomnia. So that's the time at which someone ought to do a consultation with a sleep medicine specialist or a behavioral sleep medicine specialist.
Okay. What are some of the signs that someone might be having insomnia if it's just like constantly not getting good sleep?
Well, again, so for the diagnosis, we just look at a few things. I mean, if it's happening, if a person is wanting to go to bed and go to sleep, and especially if they thought they were sleepy and then they went to bed and it's around the time that they normally would go to bed and go to sleep, and now they find that they're not able to fall asleep. So now they're awake for a longer time. I mean, it's normal to take 10-15 minutes to fall asleep, but once it's starting to get longer and longer and longer, then again, if that happens, by the time it's happening about 3 nights a week, and, again, if they're also having trouble staying asleep. So if they're finding that during the night they're awake for extended periods of time. So anytime that is like a longer time to fall asleep, or waking up during the night and awake for a longer time, or awake many, many, many times over the course of the night, if any of that is happening about 3 nights a week or more, and that continues over the course of a couple of months or so, that's when it looks like insomnia, and it does warrant targeted intervention with a specialist.
Okay. How does mental health play into our sleep? If we're anxious, if we're, have cyclical thoughts about things that are just kind of running into our minds, of course, the wind down routine can help, but how does mental health play into sleep as well?
Well, I mean, that there's a lot to say about that, and I'll keep it brief. So people who have certain kinds of behavioral health disorders are more likely to have sleep disturbance. So, for example, we see sleep disturbance frequently for people who have major depressive disorder. We see sleep disturbance frequently for people who have different kinds of anxiety disorders. We see sleep disturbance frequently for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, for just, to name a few examples. It is not necessarily the case that people with these different mental health concerns also have insomnia, but there is a higher probability that that may be so. Now, what the research tells us is that when someone has insomnia, as I talked about before, trouble falling or staying asleep at least 3 nights a week for a period of time. When a person has insomnia and another mental health or behavioral health concern, the research shows us very clearly that treating the insomnia, targeting the insomnia for treatment is a very important part of making sleep better. So, for example, if someone has a generalized anxiety and they get treatment for that anxiety and the anxiety is reduced and they improve, that doesn't necessarily mean their sleep is going to get better if they had insomnia. So in fact, we have found that treating the insomnia actually reduces anxiety, reduces depression. Whereas treating the other disorders doesn't necessarily result in improving the insomnia.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm definitely happier after a better night's sleep. You know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah. And to be clear, when a person has, improved sleep, then of course their other symptoms are going to be better.
yeah. Okay, cool. As far as I don't really know too many people that like smoke cigarettes anymore, but like vaping, nicotine, all of that stuff. Because I have a friend who vapes a lot, and like she's told me before that she's woken up in the middle of the night just because she wants to like take a hit of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Right.
that sounds like an addiction. But the effects of smoking, whatever, nicotine, how does that play into our sleep? And do you wake up because you are having withdrawals? Is that a thing?
Yes, it is a thing. So nicotine is a short-acting stimulant. So the problem, of course, and anyone who smokes or vapes or uses nicotine knows this, and anyone who knows people who smoke or vape or use nicotine also knows this. Um, People say that it helps them be relaxed. And I mean, it does have that perceived effect, of course, because it has to do with complications in, the reward centers in the brain. However, nicotine is, of course, a stimulant. So, so if a person is smoking or vaping, especially close to bedtime, what happens is they do get that hit of nicotine, and it might allow the person to be ready to go to sleep in a sort of paradoxical way. However, because it's a short-acting stimulant, it's true that a person can then wake up having a craving. And so it's just exacerbating the waking by having the nicotine right before bedtime, because then you get into this self-perpetuating pattern.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense then. So would you recommend they just like try not to vape or smoke or whatever they're doing before bed?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously it's best to quit altogether, but if that's not in the cards, then, it's a good idea to move that way before bedtime, as, far before bedtime as you can.
Okay. And speaking about things that, to avoid before bed, as far as alcohol, food, what else? Caffeine. I try not to have caffeine. Like noon is like my cutoff time. I'm like, no more caffeine for you. So what would you suggest for those three things? Food, alcohol, caffeine. When's our cutoff time?
Right. So, generally speaking, it's best to have your last big meal of the day at least a few hours before the time you expect to go to bed. So yeah, you do want to leave at least a few hours. Now, at the same time, you don't want to try to go to sleep if you're really hungry. So it's really better to have a small healthy snack just before bedtime if you're very hungry. Otherwise, right, you want to finish your meal several hours out. Alcohol, as it metabolizes, disturbs sleep. So any alcohol you have, even if it's a few hours before bedtime, it's still going to be having an effect on sleep. So that's just what will happen, and it will reduce sleep quality. And then what was the other thing? I'm sorry.
Caffeine.
Caffeine. So, right. Most people are better off limiting their total caffeine consumption, definitely keeping it to the morning, and then being aware that some people are extra sensitive to caffeine, and those people really do need to eliminate it altogether. So,
Okay. Interesting. And is there anything else that you would like to add?
no, I think we've covered all the questions that you asked.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any anything I didn't cover that you think would be really important for people to know?
I would just say that it's really important for people to recognize how much sleep contributes to our health and well-being. And so making it a priority is important. And that's going to move you in the direction of staying healthy.
Okay, very cool. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll stop this recording.